Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is welcome to the Khmer Time Crosstalk. And Khmer Time Crosstalk today has invited Professor Raymond Leo, Dean Faculty of Communication and Media and Art of Paññāsāstra University. Today we discuss about Cambodians' dynamic young generation challenge, hope, and dreams. Right? Mr. Raymond came to Cambodia in 2002. And you have been learning almost about 2 decades. You have seen Cambodian growing by your own eye. No further delay. I would like to invite the Professor Raymond to introduce yourself to our audience. Say, who are you? How are you educated? How do you find Cambodia?
Well, I'm from the United States. I first came to Cambodia in 1998 on a tourist trip, and then again in 2001 for some research.
Right.
And then finally in 2002, early 2002, I came here only planning to be here for 1 year.
All right.
And 1 year has turned into 16.
That must be something so special,
well,
so
that's
attractive.
and this is, there's many reasons, but of course it's Cambodia itself. And
Right.
for many people like me who've been here a long time, there's something about Cambodia that keeps you
Right.
connected and drawn to it.
So what made you so interested in Cambodia and stay so long?
Well,
for 16 years.
I was originally, as I said, from the United States, and I worked in various positions. I was first a journalist after graduating from university for about 3 or 4 years, and then I went back to school to get my law degree.
Right.
And worked on that and actually practiced law in the United States for a few years.
Right.
And then after that, I decided that I was more interested in academia.
Right.
And so I went back again to graduate school to get my graduate degrees
Right.
in media and also in international relations. And then was doing some research and also some part-time teaching at universities.
Right.
And then I came here on a tourist trip, like I said, in 1998.
Right.
And then in 2001, I was helping a person who was doing a research project.
Right.
And then I met some people who were working with Paññāsāstra University,
Right.
and they asked me if I was interested in being here for a year to teach. And I said, well, I'm not sure about that. And then a few months later, I said, why don't I call them? And I asked
Right.
them, are you still looking for somebody to run your media department? They said yes.
Right.
So I came back and I said, okay, I'll give you 1 year. And then since then, I've been here.
Okay.
And I've also taught, or still teaching there at PUC, but also at Royal University of Law and Economics.
Right.
And I've done a number of consultancy projects with the World Bank, ADB, Asian
Right.
Development Bank, UNDP. And I currently finished a project with UNESCO and the Ministry of Information in drafting the new
Right.
Access to Information Law.
Right.
So I keep busy with that, and it's been an interesting 16 years.
Right. You must be observe a lot about the way how Cambodian society moving for almost two decades, right? So 16 years, another 4 years, I mean 20 years. So you also seen the young people get growing education, whatever. What sort of your observation by your own eye, seeing differently Cambodian young people now and before, especially the young people who born after wars?
Yeah, well, I compare my students now to the students I had when I first came here.
Right.
In 2002, 2003.
Right.
And in terms of their intellectual ability, it's the same, but I think these young people now are very different. They're more confident.
Right.
They're more aware of the world, outside world, and I think a lot of it has to do with the explosion of social media here.
Right.
They're more driven by trying to improve themselves. They're more curious about the outside world. They're starting to travel more. They're coming into contact through their work and through their social networks with foreigners. So I think this young generation is, as I've told you before we started, the best way I could describe it for many of these young people is their dynamism.
Right.
There's incredible amount of energy out there among many young people. Of course, you know, young people cannot be talked about as a whole thing, as a monolith, as just one thing. But I think the young people that I deal with day by day at the universities, I've met some very talented young people who are doing very well now, and in many different fields.
Right. What are they good at the most? You can give us some evidence, some example, because look, in Korean people, our ancestors built Angkor Wat and make it a very famously temple. What good at the Khmer people today could do? Is that the spirit of the Angkorian our ancestors still alive, or people getting more lazy than before?
Well, you know, I think it's, as I said, it's not perfect.
Right.
You know, like all young people were, you know, you could say the same thing about young people in the United States. You have young people who are not motivated, who want to get the easy way out, who are looking for just material things, and you find that too. But what I'm saying is, among the talented ones, and there's a number of talented ones, there's this spirit and energy that they have that keep. One of the reasons I'm still here is they inspire me. You know, they really do.
Right.
Many of these young people come from very humble backgrounds.
Right.
And many of them are able, through their hard work and perseverance, to get scholarships to study abroad. I mean, for me, I've had several experiences with this, and it's hard to put it in measure it in material ways. But when you have, for example, last year, a young woman who was from a poor family in Kampong Cham, informed me that she gets a scholarship to study for a master's degree in London. Right. That's, her life is going to change. Right. And when she told me that, I had to go inside of my office by myself because the feelings were so strong. And when you see this, and you're beginning to see this among a lot of young people, these opportunities they get, that's inspiring.
Right. So Khmer young people, they have a talented, like as their own ancestor as well. But maybe the question about how big the opportunity that they could create, or government can help to create it.
Well, I think one of the things that I tell my students, and this has been a problem that we've had, is to not, you know, they learn about examples in development, for example, from different countries. We talked off camera about Singapore, European model, American model, the Chinese model, all these different models of development, Japanese model. And what I tell the students is, you know, no model is perfect, and not copy the model, but you can learn from a lot of different models. You can learn the good parts of it, and also you can adapt those models to the Cambodian context. You cannot do a template where you apply it to the Cambodian case, because it's not going to work. Cambodia has its own history, its own social history, its own context. Then what you do is you learn from all these things and you apply it in the Cambodian context, and you apply it to local conditions.
So we Cambodian eat prahok. We cannot be eat hamburger all the time. Right? So Indian having food with the fingers, so probably cannot force Indian to having food with the chopstick like a Chinese. So same thing with Cambodia, right?
Yeah, it's like for example, we study in my development theory class about different models of development, and we look at the Swedish model, which you know, the students very much like the idea of the social welfare state, you know, pensions and health care and all that. But I also tell them that Sweden is a very different country with a different culture and a different history.
Right.
But you can learn about what the Swedes do.
Right.
And then think about it in applying it in a Cambodian context.
Right. Can you share two things outside Cambodia? After war, World War 1945, Japan and Germany, after war they build up their country as well. So how they started, how the young generation of the German people and Japanese people do in their times?
Well, you look at the Japanese example, and we'd like to talk about the Japanese example, because Japan didn't really have much of a tradition of democracy, of little democracy.
Right.
But after the war, and you had the Americans there with General MacArthur, and you had the moral authority of the emperor.
Right.
Japan just decided to turn into a liberal democracy.
Right.
With no history of that. And now, if you look at Japan, and Japan, of course, they're not going to, you can't say the Japanese liberal democracy is perfect, but Japan, I think, is generally considered to be a very robust democratic system with freedom of expression and democratic institutions and courts that are competent and free of political influence.
Right.
But they just did it. Same thing in Germany. Although Germany had some experience with that. I mean, we were talking about the ill-fated Weimar Republic before Hitler, but after the war, you're right, at least in the western part of Germany, you had this creation through the Marshall Plan of rebuilding the German economy and also creation of democratic institutions. But there was a will there by the German people and the Japanese people to do it. It took a will, hard work and commitment.
The leader will, and also the people.
And the will. I mean, in the Japanese way, you look at the hard. Japan is noted for their hard work, their meticulous care in what they do.
Right.
And they do it, and they did it. And I think one of the things that we have to teach our young people is that nothing is going to come easy. You have to work hard at it.
Right.
You have to learn first. You have to gain the knowledge.
Right.
But you have to do it yourself. We have had, of course, a history here in Cambodia of foreign involvement, foreign aid, donors, and that's been good in terms of helping develop our institutions and, as the development people like to say, capacity building.
Right.
But as I tell the students, it really comes down to you. You have to then, you can't put your hand out, please help me all the time. You have to do it yourself. And what's very exciting today is that you're beginning to see a lot of young Cambodian entrepreneurs, people in civil society that are taking charge of things. It's I looked at when I first came here in 2001, 2002. Most of the international, and maybe you remember this, Kimsong, most of the international NGOs, most of the staff, and I may be wrong, but it seemed to me that in my contact with international NGOs that were here, most of them had, at least in the management, foreign staff.
Exactly.
And now if you look at the international NGOs that are here now, Asia Foundation, Transparency International, many others, the staff is primarily Khmer. And not just the lower level staff, but the higher level staff.
Senior one.
Yeah.
Right.
That wasn't the case 15, 16 years ago.
Right.
And I think that's also a good sign.
Is that because of the part of the right education system, or maybe because of the country so open with the internet and technologies?
I think it's a combination of everything. I think you had the growth, the explosion of social media.
Right.
And, we all know about the problems that we have now with social media platforms, the issues with Facebook and all of that. But I have to say, despite all the negativity and all the negative impacts that have occurred with regards to social media, the so-called fake news and all of that, but as a whole, in general, I think that the development of social media here has been a very, very important and a positive impact.
in
in
machine
Cambodia.
and driving.
And especially in young people.
Right.
I mean, it's getting to the point now where we have to start educating young people about proper use of social media, because
Right.
now we're getting some problems with people not understanding how to use it and,
Right.
and not reading properly and not paying attention. But I
Right.
think as a whole, the growth of these social media platforms, and I don't work for Facebook, so
Right.
I'm not promoting them, but I will have to say that Facebook's growth here has contributed a lot.
Right. I
to
think also
opening
maybe
the
thank to the government that they opened the country with the Facebook and different, completely different
They're
from
aware of
China.
things. They're aware of things,
Right.
and then you have, the growth of, for example, cinemas. Movie theaters here that are showing international films.
Right.
And so I remember when I first came here in class discussions, and I would make some references to movies or singers, international movies and singers, and students
Right.
didn't know who I was talking about.
Right.
Right? They didn't know who I was talking about because they didn't have that. They didn't have
Exactly.
access. Now I tell the students, they know these singers, they know these movies,
Right.
they know all this, they know what's going on.
Right.
And that's another thing that young people are more aware of, not just what's going on in Cambodia, they're
Right.
aware of what's going on in the world. And that 15, 16 years ago, you didn't have that. Even the
Right.
bright kids did. It was like a provincial town.
Right. Now even like a 5 years old or 6 years old boy, they already have the iPad.
That's right.
On their hand already. There may
That's
be
right.
something hope for the future of younger generation. But let me ask you like this. Just a textbook of education and the education system, if without the technology, without Facebook and internet, would the young Cambodian people knowledgeable, understanding the world and the regional, or what would be happening
I think
without
it
technology?
would have been harder, because of course we still don't have. First of all, we still have challenges in creating a reading culture here.
Right.
It's improving, and I'm seeing a lot of young people starting to read.
Right.
But we need to develop that more. Unfortunately, we don't have that because
Right.
during the war and during the 90s, we didn't have a lot of books.
Right.
I was in Hanoi about 3 or 4 months ago visiting a friend and near the old part of Hanoi, and I walked by this bookshop, and there's all these people reading books. And they're Vietnamese translations of international business books on business,
Right.
but translated into Vietnamese.
Vietnamese.
And people are buying books, and
Right.
they're reading over there. And you don't find that as much here. I think part of the reason is we don't have enough books translated into Khmer.
Right.
And also the problem is translation of books, including like literature and other things.
Right.
That's a skill, because we do have translators here, but sometimes translations are more than just finding the word, and
Right.
you have to find sometimes a word, as you know, in
Content,
Khmer,
right.
a word does not translate easily in English into Khmer, so you have to find a word in Khmer
Exactly.
that has the same feeling or meaning, and that's skill.
Right.
And so hopefully we can develop that. I have a very dynamic young lady, a friend, who is trying to start a publishing business for Khmer children's books.
Right.
And she's a book writer herself, and
Right.
she's writing children's books in Khmer.
Right.
And she's trying to get other young Cambodians to write children's books with
Right.
pictures in Khmer, to market it to children, to
Right.
parents, to get children learn
Right.
how to read, the reading culture, right when they're young. And the books are picture books with a few words, but
Right.
they're very important. And that, I don't think you would have heard of that kind of business venture a few years ago. So getting back to your question, your problem is, reading. So there's lack of books. So the internet, because of the lack of books and the lack of enough books translated into Khmer, because we have books now in English, but, and many of our students can speak English and read English well, but it's important to have the books in the mother language.
Exactly.
Very important.
Exactly.
Like the Vietnamese. Many
Right.
Vietnamese can read English, but they have translations of books in business, books of literature in
Right.
Vietnamese language. Hopefully we can have these great books of literature, these great
Right.
books on business and economics and politics translated into Khmer.
Right.
So because we don't have that, the students then have to go into the internet.
Right.
And that's in English, although many young people are using the Khmer language script.
Exactly.
And then you have news sources in Khmer
Right.
that people are accessing. So I think because they don't have books, as many books, they have to use the internet more.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this. Often I heard the foreign friends say that Khmer people are not smart compared to the Vietnamese or Thais or Japanese or Singaporean. What sort of the problem that is it true, or you think that Khmer people are smart, or what any problem that can help them improve the smarter?
Well, with all due respect to those people, I mean, I deal with some very bright young Cambodians, and there's a couple of things that they lack is opportunity, and educational resources, and confidence. They are confident now, but they're still, compared to their peers, when there's scholarship opportunities, many of them will say, well, I don't know. I mean, I've had students who got a scholarship, and I say, if I wouldn't have kept bothering you about that scholarship, you wouldn't have applied, and you got it.
Right.
Because there is that feeling of inferiority that sometimes they have. But I will tell you one thing: when my students go to universities around the world, University of London, great university. We have one student study. We've had our Fulbright student study in the United States.
Right.
Australian National University, University of Tokyo, Nagoya University, National University of Singapore, great universities in Europe. And when they go there, they do just fine. And they're not given any special breaks, any special lenience. When those students go to study in top universities around the world, they do well. They do well. They can compete very well with their foreign classmates.
Right.
So the problem is opportunity, and the problem is resources. Another thing is IT. I know, and maybe you know, working here, there's some really bright young Cambodians who know a lot about IT.
Right.
I mean, they're very knowledgeable. They're from very talented kids out there.
Right.
So, sometimes I get very irritated when I hear foreigners say this. The young Cambodians, if given the opportunity and are well prepared, when they go out there, they can compete with anyone.
Right. But how to inject the confidence? Confidence is very important.
Confidence is, because the confidence is when they hear foreigners say this, they listen, they hear this, and they feel that, because their country, Cambodia has gone through so much, they feel that maybe they're not as good.
Right.
But, what I like to often do is to show examples that we've had some brilliant people in our history. And, when Von Molivan passed away, and I talked, many students knew about him, but not enough, and we talked about the great architectural creations that he did. So anyway, what I'm saying is, if the student is prepared and the student gets the opportunity, all the students who've gotten scholarships to study abroad at top universities around the world, they do fine.
Right. So create opportunity, maybe themselves have to create opportunity, or family have to create opportunity, or government or ministry help them to create opportunity. Right,
and they have to also, one thing that they have to develop is a good work ethic.
Right.
And some of the young people lack that.
Right.
And that is a problem. But what I try to tell the young people, the bright ones, is that even if you have the smarts, you have to work hard.
Right. Many subjects that the people are studying and learning to get job, but one of the subjects that you're teaching at Paññāsāstra University is communication and the many art. Why is that so important, you think, for Cambodian society these days?
In our program is a bit just a little bit different from DMC. DMC's been around a long time, and they've done they're a wonderful institution, and they've trained many people working in media, and they have a great journalism program there. We don't have as many students majoring in journalism. Most of our students are majoring in business communication or mass media, and those are fields in advertising. Advertising is a booming industry here in Cambodia. There's several advertising agencies and companies that are here. They snap up our students when they graduate very quickly because here's a big change. Advertising agencies now are actively looking for qualified young Cambodians because the market that they're trying to attract is a young generation. And if they have people who are working in these advertising agencies who know what young people like, what they want, and they can attract those type of people to work for their companies. So we have a lot of people, a very popular major for our media students is a business communication, which is advertising, public relations, marketing. Then another popular major we have is mass media, which many of our students are working for media companies like TV, online companies. I told you off camera that we had several students working for Sabai. We have several students working for TV channels as news presenters. We have several students that are actually written Cambodian movies. We have one young lady who's written who wrote the script for 2 very popular Cambodian movies, and we have several other filmmakers as well. And then we have other students that are working in NGOs as communications officers and media liaisons.
So free press is very, very important for many countries, especially Cambodia as well. How do you feel about the freedoms in Cambodia these days in general?
Well, I think, you know, we have to also look at, you know, how can I say, the way that media is used. I think I talked about the problem that sometimes we're having now is, and I tell my students is, you know, press freedom is very important, media freedom is very important, but also we have misuse of social media. Where things that, you know, I hate using that word because it's used so much, but fake news, as we all hear about, that people, you know, spread false information. There's a lack of civility online where people are rude and insult each other. There's all sorts of harassment online. Those are the challenges we face, and we're starting to see that here in Cambodia, unfortunately.
Okay, now we would like to break 5 minutes, so we'll talk more about the challenges and the hope and dreams for the second session. Thank you.
Thanks.
Business Insight គឺជាកម្មវិធីថ្មីមួយទៀតរបស់ទូរទស្សន៍អនឡាញខ្មែរខាំដែលផ្ដោតសំខាន់លើកិច្ចពិភាក្សាស៊ីជម្រៅចំពោះនានាការនិងការវិវត្តទៅនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចជំនួញនិងការវិនិយោគជាតិក្នុងតំបន់និងពិភពលោកកម្មវិធីនេះនឹងផ្ដល់ជាព័ត៌មានក៏ដូចជាពុទ្ធិបន្ថែមដល់ទស្សនិកជនធុរជន និងវិនិយោគិនជាតិនិងអន្តរជាតិដើម្បីងាយស្រួលក្នុងការសម្រេចចិត្តពង្រីកអាជីវកម្មនិងវិនិយោគបន្ថែមក្នុងព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាកម្មវិធីជ្រុងមួយនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចមានផ្សាយជូនទស្សនារៀងរាល់ថ្ងៃសុក្រវេលាម៉ោង 8 ព្រឹក
Well,
ជ្រុងមួយនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចឬហៅថា Business Insight គឺជាកម្មវិធីថ្មីមួយទៀតរបស់ទូរទស្សន៍អនឡាញខ្មែរខាំដែលផ្ដោតសំខាន់លើកិច្ចពិភាក្សាស៊ីជម្រៅចំពោះនានាការនិងការវិវត្តទៅនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចជំនួញនិងការវិនិយោគជាតិក្នុងតំបន់និងពិភពលោកកម្មវិធីនេះនឹងផ្ដល់ជាព័ត៌មានក៏ដូចជាពិធីបន្ថែមដល់ទស្សនិកជនធុរជននិងវិនិយោគិនជាតិនិងអន្តរជាតិដើម្បីងាយស្រួលក្នុងការសម្រេចចិត្តពង្រីកអាជីវកម្មនិងវិនិយោគបន្ថែមក្នុងព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាកម្មវិធីជ្រុងមួយនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចមានផ្សាយជូនទស្សនារៀងរាល់ថ្ងៃសុក្រវេលាម៉ោង 8 ព្រឹកជ្រុងមួយនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចឬហៅថា Business Insight គឺជាកម្មវិធីថ្មីមួយទៀតរបស់ទូរទស្សន៍អនឡាញខ្មែរខាំដែលផ្ដោតសំខាន់លើកិច្ចពិភាក្សាស៊ីជម្រៅចំពោះនានាការនិងការវិវត្តទៅនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចជំនួញនិងការវិនិយោគជាតិក្នុងតំបន់និងពិភពលោកកម្មវិធីនេះនឹងផ្ដល់ជាព័ត៌មានក៏ដូចជាពិធីបន្ថែមដល់ទស្សនិកជនធុរជននិងវិនិយោគិនជាតិនិងអន្តរជាតិដើម្បីងាយស្រួលក្នុងការសម្រេចចិត្តពង្រីកអាជីវកម្មនិងវិនិយោគបន្ថែមក្នុងព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាកម្មវិធីជ្រុងមួយនៃសេដ្ឋកិច្ចមានផ្សាយជូនទស្សនារៀងរាល់ថ្ងៃសុក្រវេលាម៉ោង 8 ព្រឹក
So, Professor Raymond, now we can continue a little bit about the how the young Cambodian use the communication and press freedom to engage or to absorb knowledge or understanding the world.
Well, you know, with the use of social media, they can access articles. You know, one of the things I try to encourage the students is when they're using it, social media, and they want to get information, go to sources of information that are known and respected, and have a background and a history. And what I mean is, you know, media sources, not just rumors. One of the things that they can, you know, what they can access is, and I often do this with my posts on social media, is to encourage students to read articles from various news sources around the world to gain an understanding. Not just news articles, but commentary and analysis. I often assign them in my classes so the students can discuss them with me. So I think they can learn from that. And many of the bright ones do that, but we still have to push the students to keep doing it.
But one thing that you probably note that Cambodian young people lack of the critical thinking, right? So when they read something or they believe in something already, or without the using filters of thinking and then stuff, that's a problem that you face.
That's a problem. I know Dr. Naran at Education is working very hard to improve our pedagogy and our teaching techniques. He's done a great job, and I'm very happy that he's continuing for another mandate. You know, the problem, as you know, Kimsong, is when you were a young student, is the teaching techniques are still teacher write on the board, student copy and listen to the teacher, and the student
then read and repeat again
repeat what the teacher said, instead of the teacher encourages discussion. That the teacher may answer a question with a question. That's what I sometimes do when the students ask a question. I answer with a question. And, you know, oftentimes, particularly when we in international relations classes, I tell the students there's no answer here. Particularly in global affairs, there's no clear right or wrong. And at first, it's very difficult for students to understand that. But eventually, you know, the smart ones begin to, you try to engage them in discussion. you really, it's hard because many times they'll be very quiet and not answer.
Right.
But lately I've been getting more participation from the students.
Right.
But I think it's a struggle because early on when the students are in school,
Right.
they don't learn that kind of way.
Right.
And I think part of it is, of course, respect your teacher and all of that and listen to your teacher, but a teacher doesn't have to be like the dictator of the classroom. A teacher, the great teachers that inspired me are the ones who inspired me to think for myself.
Right, exactly.
Who I respected him or her because they inspired me, not because I was afraid of them.
Right.
And they opened me to new thinking. They introduced me to books and writers and thinking and thinking for myself.
Right.
And that's what I think we need to do and encourage, even at a very young age, children to, of course, we want to encourage students to be respectful and have moral bearings, but we also want to encourage students to think for themselves and problem solve.
Yeah, but you think that the Cambodian education system need to change a bit from the ground, because up to the high education university, you probably have the foreign professor have a different method and something like that. But the low ground, like the year 2, year 3, year 4, there is no culture of the motivation or encourage students to discuss.
And that's the challenge. That's the challenge that, you know, as we get more young teachers, and one of the ideas, how do we attract young teachers? You know, we know that salaries of teachers are very low. I mean, we have the different models that we could use, and I know we have many young people who would like to be teachers. They know that you can't get rich from teaching, but of course we need to pay teachers accordingly.
Right.
I always tell students, you can't get rich from teaching, but you also deserve to have a salary that treats you as a professional.
Right.
And so I think if we can find a way to raise teacher salaries, and students who will go into teaching know they're not, it's not high salary, but we have to show that because of their hard work, some professional respect by giving them a decent salary so they can raise a family and have a career, treat them as a professional.
Right.
If we can attract more young people into teaching.
But I mean, in 1960, very famous on the issue. The teacher make a lot of money and pay a lot of respects by society. For those who become a teacher, they go to engage why they already offer if they have the grooms, you know.
I mean, I've spoken to retired teachers who were teaching during the Sihanouk period, where teachers were paid pretty well.
Right.
And I mean, she told me that she was able to afford a little car and have a house and live well.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, you hear stories even in the rural areas who is very well respected besides, you know, the head monk of the pagoda, Daja.
Right.
The teacher, Lukru.
Yeah.
And often, like you said, a young teacher who would come to the village was often considered, if he was not married, he was often considered very eligible to marry someone in the village because he was teachers were considered very high position.
And respects.
And respected.
In society. Okay. What the role of the government should change and make it better for our young generation? As you observe, every young Cambodian have talented hiding.
They have it.
Hiding somewhere in their mind, in their heart, but no tear out to get their talented to use it. How to get it? How to use everyone talented for a better society?
Well, I think there has to be, and I know the ministry is working hard on this, to develop critical thinking skills, to develop, in other words, I know people use critical thinking skills and they don't know what that means. They use that term a lot. What I mean by critical thinking skills is be able to, for example, to compare and contrast, to be able to make judgments about when I should use something and when I shouldn't, to look at look at a situation and be able to find out the reasons why this is happening. So, for example, in history, I'll give you an example of teaching history. You can find many young students who, if I tell you who were the kings of the Angkor period, they could tell me all the names of the kings. All the names. But then I ask them, Jayavarman VII, can you tell me a little bit about his period of reign? What were the major aspects? I don't know.
Right.
Why did the Angkor Empire disappear?
Right.
I don't know. And that's what I'm saying. In history is not just
Right.
memorizing names.
Not memorizing, but
It's also explaining why things happen,
Right.
what caused something to happen,
Right.
why did this happen, and what were the impacts later.
Right.
And that's part of critical thinking. Studying, for example, business examples. Harvard Business School uses the case study
Right.
example, where you look at a business problem based on a case. You do case studies. And anyway, what I'm saying is, there has to be, in the pedagogical approaches,
Right.
there has to be more of that,
Right.
as opposed to just memorizing.
Right. Well, I understand that the education getting better, but you still have seen that people at countryside who are low education, they still get no opportunity, and they find the way migrate to the other
Yeah.
country to looking for job. How to improve that?
Well, I don't have any easy answers for that. I mean, it's very complicated because, when people work abroad, they do bring money into villages.
Right.
You have villages that I know that are supported by, you have people working in Korea,
Right.
making pretty good money, bringing money back, and supporting whole villages.
Right.
The interesting thing about migrants is, when they come back here, and I know there's been some studies done, but it's still inconclusive. When the migrants come back here, what do they do?
Right.
If they learn a new skill
From
working there, do they use that skill to apply when they come back here in Cambodia? So if I learn a skill in Korea and I come back here,
Right.
do I apply that newly found skill here?
Right.
There's still studies that need to, there's studies going on, I've read a few, but
Right.
it's still not clear.
But also the risk is a female migrant worker who migrate to work at the neighboring country. They probably face more risk, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they easily fell into the services industry,
Right.
or sexual trade, something like that. That's kind of concern. Any idea that you might thought that should be avoided? Should be if government should create more job for female to work in the country?
This is
rather
going to
than
be, this is a big challenge. You have a demographic issue, population issue. Cambodia remains a very, very young country.
Right.
And the number of young people coming out of schools, out of high school, out of universities, every year growing.
Right.
The challenge will be, and I know the government knows this, is how do we create jobs for these young people?
Right.
Good jobs.
Right. Good income.
Good income.
Right.
Because I think many of these young people are not going to settle. They come out with a degree, they're not going to want to drive a tuk-tuk.
Right.
They want a job that will have some future.
Right.
Pay them money, income,
Right.
be able to raise a family. I think this is a challenge. We are a country of 15 or 16 million people. We're just now going into lower middle income status.
Right.
The challenge will be, how are we going to create jobs
Right.
for young people so they don't have to always go abroad?
Right.
I tell my young people, my students, I call them my young people, my students, that when you go abroad and you get that scholarship and study and you learn those skills, you get that education, you come back here and you help
Right.
your country. And that's great, but there also has to be opportunities for them.
Right.
And also I know many people in the business community, international business community, and this is part of the education, that students who come to them don't have not the soft skills. They don't have the ability to take initiative,
Right.
to delegate authority. They still are lacking in those kind of things.
Right.
So I think the challenges are the education system, how to keep modernizing it,
Right.
to keep up to date with what's going on in the world today in our region of ASEAN,
Right.
and then also to find a way or find ways to develop our economy here to create opportunities to
Right.
create jobs for young people.
One of one of the concepts that I learned from the student and a friend of mine who's around me, when they study, they tend to believe that after they graduate, they would looking for a job rather than self-employed. So they not feel that when they finish school, they can form up a business or create job by themselves, and then they are aiming, looking to work for someone rather than employees by themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a concept in Cambodia, maybe also a concept in abroad, or maybe how is it different?
In terms of
As
that
in
they work
terms
for
of-
someone else before they
Yeah.
start their own business?
Right. I mean, they graduate and they come back and they thinking about their own business. They want to work for somebody else before creating their own business or like they say job employment or self-employed.
Well, I think I mean, most of the students I deal with, many of them, their ultimate dream is to have their own
Right.
business or be able to be their own boss.
Right.
But I think it is important for them to gain experience.
Right.
And you gain that experience, particularly if you're with a good company or a good employer.
Right.
You gain that experience. You gain that experience, you begin to get an income, you gain that self-confidence, and then you can, if you want to branch out and form your own company or
Right.
form your own business, you can do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I also tell the students that, they should try to have some kind of a idea of where they're going,
Right.
And one of the problems that employers talk about, I talk to many small businesses here, particularly foreign-owned small businesses,
Right.
is that sometimes young people tend to bounce around too much. They go one place for
To
6
another
months
place.
and they go to another.
Right.
And what I tell a lot of young people that I advise is, obviously sometimes you can be in a job and you get an incredible opportunity and you have to go.
Right.
Or maybe it's a very bad situation and you can't work there and you have to go. But if you're working and you get your first job and you're happy with it, it's a good job,
Right.
You're learning, I always tell them, give yourself 2 years there.
Right.
Because it does look bad on a CV when you're moving around every 6 months.
Like every 6 months or 3 months.
And so I tell students, give an employer 2 to 3 years,
Right.
2 years minimum, learn from that job, get experience, and then you can move on. Because
Right.
I often have foreigners who own businesses here sometimes complain
Right.
that they move around.
Right. And the fresh student, they after graduate, they straight away looking for a job who expect to get more pay.
Right.
But maybe other country will encourage the student to get volunteer.
Yeah.
First, but
Well, what I think what we try to encourage, and we have in our department at PUC, in the media department, we have an internship program. Other schools do it too. I think DMC does this, where we allow students to do an internship, which is
Right.
they get some stipend. It's not a full salary. They may get some transportation and some minor expenses paid by the employer.
Right.
But generally, they spend one academic term working for an employer,
right.
sometimes part-time, 20 to 30 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
They get experience. They learn the field. They participate and they're given responsibilities, but they also go to meetings and they watch how the
Right.
business works. And then they gain experience. Many of our students who have done internships, for example, with advertising companies,
Right.
they perform very well and they're hired right after as full-time employees. So
Right.
I think there has to be more practical experience because, as I say, even as someone as an academic, you don't learn just from being in the classroom.
Right.
You have to learn to do hands-on things.
Right. We talk about the hope and dream. Probably in my term, when I dream something, I never thought that I could dream something. But perhaps our young generation these days, they can dream of something, right? If they want to do engineering, or they want to be a teacher, or they want to be an entrepreneur, they can achieve their dream. Do you think?
Well, I think about that, but I also, and it's good to dream. And I tell the students sometimes, or many times, that it's good to have dreams. You
Right.
have to have dreams. Very important to have dreams. Have a sense, a vision of where you want to be someday.
Right.
But after you dream, you have to wake up. And what I mean by that is, if all you do is dream, but you don't have any plans on how you're going to be able to achieve that dream, then it's useless. So that's what I mean by wake up. You have to dream, and then
Right.
you wake up from the dream and you say, okay, this is what we have to do
Right.
to get to that dream. Because dreaming by itself is just a dream. And you know Kimsong, and I know many people, both here in the United States, who say, oh, someday I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I go, what are you planning, how are you going to do it?
Right.
I don't know. You have to have a plan, and that plan may be working for an employer for 1 or 2 years,
Right.
getting that experience, and then moving on.
Right.
But that's what I would advise students. Have a dream, important to have a dream,
Right.
but then you have to have a clear idea how you're going to achieve that dream.
Right. So what happen if the dream not come true? Can someone or any professor can help them to make their dream come true?
Well, you know, as I tell the students, the fact that you have a goal is important. Even if you don't achieve that goal, the fact that you're focused on something. Sometimes I've had in my past dreams that have not come true, but on my way to trying to achieve that dream, something happens. I have an opportunity. I get an opportunity.
Right.
You know what I mean? I have this dream.
You target the dream, but on the way
And
along.
then, yeah, it's like with Cambodia. I had this dream of being an academic in the United States, and then on
Right.
the way to that, I took this trip to Cambodia,
Right.
and it changed my life. And even though my dream of being an academic in the United States was not achieved
Yet, yeah.
but that road on my way there,
Right.
I wouldn't have had an opportunity to come to Cambodia probably if I wouldn't have been in that research project.
Right.
So it took me over to Cambodia. So it's like you're going on a road, and then you see this side road that you take
Yeah.
that may lead you to somewhere. And as I
Yeah.
tell the students, if you have you're moving towards something, sometimes opportunities will present yourself, and sometimes you don't achieve something, but because you don't achieve it, it may have opened another door.
Right.
Sometimes when you don't get an opportunity, something else comes up.
Right. Many young students at countryside on my age, they believe on the luck or bad luck. If they are born in a poor country like they born in a poor family like myself, I wouldn't have a dream or wouldn't have a hope. Because we kind of hopeless. We believe that we are born in the poor, so the God wouldn't help us. But in this day, the way of thinking probably different. Even people are born in a poor family, they can hope something,
Yeah.
they can do something, right? How do you motivate
Well,
those millions of people?
and I include you in this.
Yeah.
This is why we need to encourage students, you know, to achieve,
Right.
because they can be role models. Okay, these students that I have, the young lady who's studying at the University of London, she comes back to her village in Kampong Cham,
Right.
and there will be young girls like her
Yeah.
who see her achievement, and they see that she came from that environment and that humble family, and then she did it. You as well. They see you coming from humble background and you've
Right.
achieved. And I think what the answer to your question is, we need more Cambodian role models.
Right.
And the role models are, you know, the students can inspire, I hope I can inspire my students.
Right.
But there's a couple things that I don't have. First of all, I'm too old. Secondly, I'm not Khmer. What you have to have is someone, you know, some of these students, these young students, or these young professionals can be great role models
Right.
for young women, young men, young people.
Right.
We need more young role models where they can say, wow, he was poor, she was poor like me.
Right.
She came from a poor farm family, and look at her. She's a doctor, she's a lawyer,
Right.
she's a businesswoman. He's a editor of a big newspaper. And this is, I think, is a way, like you were talking about the young people in the provinces, this
Right.
is how they see role models. They need role models.
Right. And I think this is true, but also need to be think about the culture as well. Maybe we need to sometime need to change the way that we are thinking. Culture, when people see people better, Cambodian perhaps a lack of encouragement. It's not praying, say, okay, that you're great, you're good, but instead of that, they say, oh, they're better than me, and I should be better than them, or something like that. You know, this is something.
Yeah,
in the past
and I don't know how to answer that, and maybe you know more than that. I mean, I have. You talk about, well, if a child is not in an educated environment, that child is not going to have the motivation.
Right.
But I have several students whose parents are illiterate or very, very badly low education,
Right.
but they believe and support their children's education.
Right.
And they, create. My students tell me when they go back home to study, the father makes a light for him to read.
Okay.
And they're not educated people, but they see what I'm saying. That in some families, it could be an uneducated family, but they believe in education and want to encourage. Other families, you don't have that. I don't know what.
Your word is correct. It's the word belief. If the family believe or people believe in education, they will get prosper. They have a better life because of education.
But you have some families who are not educated, but they believe in education.
Right. If they're not education, but they believe in education, even the poor parent, they believe, like my mom, she so believe in education, so she can raise pig or whatever, sell land, rye field, everything to invest on education, to expect the future. But many families still not believe in education.
I saw very touching Facebook. Sometimes some of my students I friend on Facebook, but I don't comment on there.
Right.
But I saw a very touching post by one of, and maybe that student is watching now, and I'm going to embarrass the person, but I'm not going to mention the name.
Okay.
The student made a tribute to her dad. I think it was her dad's birthday. And she said, she doesn't come from a rich family. She said, you pay for our school, you pay for our clothes, you pay for our food.
Right.
And I see you, Daddy, with your shoes old and your clothes old, but you always provided for us. Even though you yourself,
Touching.
old clothes, old shoes,
Yeah.
but you made sure that my school is paid, our clothes were paid for, our food was on the table, everything was taken care of.
Right.
And
Good.
that touched me when I saw that.
Right. So we have another 3 minutes. We'll discuss our discussion, but maybe 1 or 2 more questions I want to ask you. Engage people in politics and in business. How to do that more? Because
Well, we need more. First of all, we need younger people in politics. We need more young people in business.
Right.
We need more women in business and more women in politics.
Right.
It's still, and I know all political parties are trying to encourage young people to participate, but it's very important to get more young people engaged.
Right.
And also in business. There are now I know there's a very active Cambodian Women's Business Association that is very active in providing role models for young women in the business.
Right.
We need to have, like I said, more young people involved in government.
Right.
I know we have, several young dynamic ministers in our government now, but we need more young people in parliament, more young people in governmental agencies, and more women.
Right.
And that should be something that we need to work toward because our country is a young country.
Right.
And it's a very different country from what it was 40 years ago. The period of the Khmer Rouge, that whole period of UNTAC. I call this generation the post-UNTAC generation. And they're very, very, these students that I deal with are part of this post-UNTAC generation.
Right.
These are young people who were born. So my students are 20, 21, 22.
Right.
So they're born after UNTAC.
So they're born around.
They're post-UNTAC generation.
Post-UNTAC generation, yes. Right.
And they don't have that experience with war. Things were tough in Cambodia, but in the 90s, things were beginning to settle down.
Right.
And people were having food to eat, and there was not as much of the threat of war.
Right.
So these young people don't have that in their background.
Right.
And that's why they're aspiring, see? That's what I think. Just one last thing. that in Cambodia now we have an aspiration. More people are aspiring. Before it was just surviving day to day.
Right.
Young people are aspiring to better things.
Right. Now they kind of like time to move up and
Yeah.
make themselves equal to any others citizens.
As opposed to during the Khmer Rouge time or after, it just
Right.
living day by day
Right.
was enough to make it through the day.
Right.
It's great achievement.
Right.
But now that they have day by day, they want to achieve
Right.
more.
So Cambodian is a cycle. Is like a cycle. Anchor period like this on the top, and then go down to the Khmer Rouge on the ground. And now 1980, 1990 just move out,
Yeah.
and probably hope one day is move up to the cycle again, to the top of the cycle again, like Anchor period. Don't you think?
Yeah. Well, we hope. I mean, but you know, as I tell the students, you have to balance. You
Right.
can't forget your culture. You can't forget your traditions.
Right.
But you have to look at things in a modern way as well. You
Right.
have to balance the two.
So what kind of the short message to your student and every young Cambodian who are watching us about the education, about job and life and motivation and so on?
Well, I mean, it's a very broad question, but I can say is keep curious, trying to learn as much as you can, and expose yourself to different ideas, not
Right.
copy them, but
Right.
learn from them. And then also, there's no substitute for hard work.
Mr. Raymond,
There's no free lunch.
no freedom. Exactly. This is all what we want to hear about, and I believe that people will learn something from us today. Thank you so
Thank
much
you so
for your
much, very
contribution,
much.
for your contribution
you.
and sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Okay,
So
thank
much.
you.